Paul, who has no sailing experience, is telling the professional sailors, hey man, I don't know if it's such a good idea for us to go out here. I have a sensing that something bad is brewing out there. And they're like, yeah, whatever, prisoner. What do you know about sailing? We're going to do it anyway. Hey, friends. Welcome to my Christian comedy channel. I believe God has a sense of humor, and we are allowed to enjoy it as we read scripture. There's so many times where I'm reading the scripture and I find it to be hilarious. And I'm like, who can I share this with? So I've created this channel so that I can share that with you. If you're interested in learning scripture while seeing the humorous side of God, this is the channel that you want to subscribe to. And if you're looking for more Bible study related content involving inductive studies and interpretations, then you want to check out my main channel. So without further ado, let's have some fun reading scripture. Today, we're going to be reading from Acts chapter 27, verses 1 to 26, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation. It says, "When the time came, we set sail for Italy. Paul and several other prisoners were placed in the custody of a Roman officer named Julius, a captain of the imperial regiment. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was also with us. We left on a ship whose home port was Adramyttium, on the northwest coast of the province of Asia. It was scheduled to make several stops at ports along the coast of the province. The next day, when we docked at Sidon, Julius was very kind to Paul and let him go ashore to visit with friends so they could provide for his needs. Putting out to sea from there, we encountered strong headwinds that made it difficult to keep the ship on course, so we sailed north of Cyprus between the island and the mainland. Keeping to the open sea, we passed along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, landing at Myra in the province of Lycia. There, the commanding officer found an Egyptian ship from Alexandria that was bound for Italy, and he put us on board. We had several days of slow sailing, and after great difficulty, we finally neared Cnidus. But the wind was against us, so we sailed across to Crete and along the sheltered coast of the island past the Cape of Salmon. We struggled along the coast with great difficulty and finally arrived at fair havens near the town of Lasea. We had lost a lot of time. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was so late in the fall, and Paul spoke to the ship's officer about it. "Men," he said, "I believe there's trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well." But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. And since Fair Havens was an exposed harbor, a poor place to spend the winter, most of the crew wanted to go on to Phoenix, farther up the coast of Crete, and spend the winter there. Phoenix was a good harbor with only a southwest and northwest exposure. When a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it, so they pulled up anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength called a northeaster burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. We sailed along the sheltered side of a small island named Cauda, where with great difficulty we hoisted aboard the lifeboat being towed behind us. Then the sailors bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it. They were afraid of being driven across to the sandbars of Syrtis off the African coast. So they lowered the anchor to slow the ship and were driven before the wind. The next day, as gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone. No one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and said, "Men, You should have just listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. You would have avoided all this damage and loss. But take courage! None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me. And he said, Don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God. It will be just as he said, but we will be shipwrecked on an island. So, guys, Paul, who has no sailing experience, is telling the professional sailors, hey man, I don't know if it's such a good idea for us to go out here. I have a sensing that something bad is brewing out there. And they're like, yeah, whatever, prisoner. What do you know about sailing? We're going to do it anyway. And then Paul was right. I find that to be so funny because there's so many times in the life of a believer where God will give you the discernment of a situation that doesn't really physically make sense. But if you just listen to that small voice giving you direction, you won't go wrong. I hope you enjoyed today's scripture reading. What passage would you like to hear next? I am already excited about the next one. There's so much more for us to explore together.